Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
All right, we're live. I've got an archery nerd and elk and mule deer nut and hunting editor for Western Hunter magazine, James Yates. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Beau. Appreciate it. That's quite the introduction. Hopefully I'm half of those things, but archery nerd, yes. Hunting editor, yeah. Hopefully we'll eventually figure out how to deer and elk hunt well, but
well, I called you a fanatic, so okay. That can go different ways.
That can go different ways, yeah.
No, I figured you'd like the intro there, but I guess that's kind of what comes to mind when I think of you. And I got to meet you last weekend. We were in Utah at the Total Archery Challenge, and it's funny because had been following along with your stuff and writing and Instagram and all those different things and some of the video content for quite a while now. And then you were talking to our mutual friend Eric Jackson, and I was like, that's James Yates, and I just walked up and introduced myself to you, and it was good to get to talk to you and get to know you a little bit on a different level.
Yeah, man, it was for sure. That that Sitka hangout over the weekend was fun, talking with you, and I was hoping to get a chance to just shoot the shit with Trevor. Can I say shit on your podcast, by the way?
You can say shit. That's fine.
It was good to talk with Eric. I hadn't met him in person, but we talked enough on the phone that I felt like I knew exactly who he was. And then Barclow, it was fun to chat with him. So yeah, it was nice to get in the shade. I'm a pale white dude. Shouldn't be in the sun too long. Just kidding. But I am pale. But either way, it was hot. It was like 106 in the valley that weekend. So,
I know that's what you were saying. I mean, when we were up at the Brighton ski resort there, it was still in the 90s, I believe. I mean, it was hot.
Yeah, I think it was probably approaching 90 at 8,200 feet, which is toasty for that elevation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and it was just the sun beating down. Yeah, so the Sitka tent was a nice little hangout spot that you could get a little bit of shade, and actually a breeze kind of came through there too, which is surprising.
Yeah, I think it was close enough to the base of the mountain that maybe we had some thermal action going on.
Yeah, that made it nice. But how can you say that you can't be out in the sun when you hunt mule deer like you do? I feel like that's something where you get the sun beating on you quite a bit.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, no, I just don't get too serious and make fun of my ultra white gingerness. So if you know Isaac Aleman, he'd concur that I am very gringo, very white.
Yeah, Isaac Isaac cracked me up. Were you there when he was when he was on the microphone calling everybody out to shoot? Did he get you
to do it? Oh, well, I knew what was going on, and I had a number of people I wanted to talk to, and I shot so many courses that no, I didn't get a chance to get roasted by Isaac, but he roasts me plenty on social media, and we just constantly razz each other. So
yeah, he's one of my favorite people, and especially when I go to those events. Like I was shooting the practice range. I just got done shooting the course, and I shot the course pretty well. And for some reason on the practice range, I started getting some anxiety with all those people around, which is good to have happen. Yeah. But I got done saying to Cody at Sitka, I said, man, I'm going to go sit down for a minute. I said, I'm not shooting real great. And as I'm walking away, Isaac calls me on the microphone, and I'm like, oh no, this is the wrong time for this to happen. He calls me up and he's like, come on. He's like, he does his big announcement. We got Beau Martonik from the East Meets West. He's like, he comes from Pennsylvania, thinks of the big shot out here in the West, just doing his thing. And then he comes up and he calls me he called me a fake weed dealer at a Luke Bryan concert. That's what he said I looked like. And I was he's so good at coming up with those things off the cuff. And I missed the target. I missed which should have been kind of a chip shot. I mean, it was 81 yards, but like I missed that centerpiece there, and definitely he definitely embarrassed me there. So
Well, that's what Isaac does. Just
yeah,
he's a good guy. He and I have known each other. He actually likes to pretend that I cut him off on a stalk, and that was the first time that we met, which was not true. I had no clue that he was there, not until after the fact. But the funny thing is, back like 12 years ago, when I was a no name in the archery world, I actually met Isaac, and he was way. This is just like when Isaac was hip stuff. He just killed 2 monster bucks, and I'd actually met him in one of our pretty popular local trails, and it was in November, and I remember thinking, oh man, that's the guy. I think he was at Badlands at the time. I can't remember, but I remember having seen him and having seen his 2 big bucks, and I was like, oh shit, that's Isaac. I don't know if I knew his name, but I recognized his face,
yeah,
and that was the first time we met. But obviously he doesn't remember that because he didn't know who the shit I was at that time. But so I make fun of him that he doesn't even remember the first time that we met, and he claims just razzing me is when I apparently cut him off on a stalk, but I had no clue he was even there. But anyway, he's a fun guy. I love Isaac.
yeah. No, I do too, and that's I feel like I feel like that's kind of always going to happen when you're hunting the front, as far as like, just hunting the Wasatch, as far as there's so many people where you're going to run into people all the time.
Yeah, you got, yeah. I don't think a lot of people are afraid of really publicizing, some deer that get killed here because you want to come do it. Good luck. There's 20,000 people who do it, and you're not going to affect anything. You're going to come, you're going to get frustrated. You're going to think that, you're going to think that, oh, this person screwed me up. Well, there's like 10 other dudes. So yeah, it's just Mortal Kombat hunting, and you kind of have to change your philosophy, and it's pretty difficult bow hunting terrain because it's thick. We're not quite high enough in elevation to use classic spot and stalk type, techniques. You have to kind of start thinking outside of the box and do ambush and light wind bumps and stuff like that to try to get the deer in a manageable position, and dogging, like kind of like you do elk hunting, dogging herds, dogging a deer herd in the rut, just waiting for that buck to be on the periphery for you to strike, kill a lot of deer that way. Anyway, different tactics because of the elevation. We're not quite high enough to put, some basins you can get some spot and stalking in. But for the most part, the bucks just descend into big clumps of trees, like huge, forests, if you will, or just more or less hard to stalk. And then obviously you're dealing with the people, so it's ultra thick, tons of hunting pressure. It's hands down the most hunted place out west. I mean, anybody with a tag in the state can hunt it. I like to joke that any given weekend, in the major canyons of the extended archery, there's probably, in November, I bet you there's 10,000 hunters in a few canyons. Yeah.
That is insane. I mean, that's like, you're talking like Pennsylvania first day of rifle season type of deal. Like we're known for the Orange Army, but it's just, you probably can't see as many people because they're not wearing orange.
Yeah. Unfortunately, bow hunting, I've done a lot of sitting and ambushing, sitting escape routes. So you just got to figure out different ways, different tactics. I'm actually, funny that we're kind of talking about this, because I'm actually writing an article right now for, this will be for the November, December issue of Western Hunter, about using unconventional tactics and seasons to continue your pursuit of mule deer. So, like October type hunts or rut type hunts, the type of hunts that kind of put you out of the quintessential August, September high country spot and stalk that we all want to do that. But honestly, I think that some of those units where there is really good spot and stock, high country, early season, they're becoming really hard to draw. So, a couple of units that I'm thinking of in Colorado that I wish I could get those tags, I can't. In fact, some of the tags are way easier to get a muzzleloader or rifle tag than the archery because, everyone wants to go spot and stock in the high country, bet a buck, go stock him. That's what we all dream about. But there's only there's not a few, but there's a limited number of places that you can actually do that. And those popularity of those have kind of pushed it out of the grasp of the every year type draw.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. I mean, I think that's anybody that wants to hunt mule deer. I feel like it's their dream to hunt, that August, September timeframe,
Yeah.
high country, spot and stock, big velvet, mule deer. I mean, I know that's what, mine is, and to be able to do that sometime. And I hadn't filled you in on this. I don't remember if I did, but the only time I tried to hunt mule deer before was when I went to Colorado in 2021. I cashed in some points and I went in, and when I was heading to the hunt, I was feeling just sick and run down, and I just wasn't feeling well, and I ended up getting altitude sickness really bad and ended up in the hospital from it, which I've hunted at that elevation before, never had issues, and hunted after and never had problems. But they said it was just a combination of being sick and everything that made it, that much worse. So I never really got the true experience to get to do it. My cousin had killed a deer on that hunt, but I was packing off the mountain at that point. But it's one of those hunts that I feel like that a lot of people dream of, but because of that, it's this picturesque thing of hunting that high country spot. It's harder to get tags.
Yeah, harder to get tags. Yeah. There's a couple units in Colorado that the unit that I'm hunting right now, it's easier to get the muzzleloader tag. So that's the hunt that I've been doing because I can still get it second choice or 0 points, right? I bounce between a couple of different units. But yeah, when it comes to I'm an archery nerd. That's my bread and butter. But when it comes to hunting Utah deer, I'm pretty much archery only. I hunt out of my backyard. I'm fortunate to live at the base of Big Cottonwood Canyon, right up near the mountain. So I'm up that canyon 3 to 4 days a week scouting and then hunting. Fortunately, I've got a job that allows me flexibility in the mornings. A lot of people think that they only see me constantly shooting my bow or hunting, but I've got the type of job that allows me to kind of interface with people during the day, but then also work late hours at night. What people don't see is that, sure, I may go to the range 3 or 4 times a week and I may scout in the mornings, but I'm up till midnight every night working. So I pull 40, 45 hour work day at my engineering job, do my Western hunter stuff, social stuff, shoot, work out, scout, and, attend to my family, my boys. I've got 2 boys, my wife, and I end up just cutting out my sleep. So, I was at Easton the other day and some guy, it wasn't being rude or anything, made a comment like, "Man, you just seem to have all the time in the world." And I was like, "Well, I don't feel that way. My sleep definitely doesn't feel that way."
Yeah, it's funny because from the outside looking in, that's exactly what people see, and yeah, I don't know how you do it with the sleep thing so when I was for the first 4 years, it's a necessity really if you want to do those things, but when the first 4 years I was doing this podcast and then was working my job that I was working in manufacturing full time, and I was working 45, 50 hours a week, and then coming back and editing podcasts and trying to use my vacation to go on these trips and do things. And it's just like I track everything on my Garmin watch, my sleep and stuff. And it was like, I was averaging between 4 and 4.5 hours of sleep a night. And I was getting sick all the time and run down. And now that I've kind of transitioned to making it, or to doing this stuff full time a little bit.
Full
It
time.
definitely is. I've prioritized sleep a little bit more to,
More,
you
yeah.
know, my goal is always to try to hit 7 hours now, but you
Mm-hmm.
know, usually it's like 6.5. And I feel a lot better when I do that. But, you know, it's
Yeah.
honestly, I was still doing the same things, you know, beforehand. It was just like, you gotta figure out how you're going to make time.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'll probably pay for it when I'm older with dementia or something, but I kind of just joke sleep when you're dead. But my, I do, I actually am not very, I'm not a very skilled person, honestly. That sounds weird for me to say, but the one skill that I do feel like I have is I can grind. And then for whatever reason, I perform actually really well on very little sleep. And I got that from my mom. She's the same way.
Okay.
So like, I don't feel like I'm naturally gifted at shooting a bow. I joke that I've got a friend Jaron that shoots his bow one hundredth of what I do, and I feel like if he shot his bow just a little bit more, he's just naturally skilled with it, and I have to be a masochist and shoot every day to hold a decent group. That's just I'm just not the most skilled person, but was born with kind of a grind ethic and an ability to perform well on little sleep. So I take advantage of both those things because otherwise I'd be a sorry little ginger, according to Isaac.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I think it's important to note, like, I mean, as far as like recognizing yourself, because I can hear you. I'm not talented at just about anything that I do, but it's like anything you put effort towards, anybody can be, can become good at it if you put in the effort. And it's like, I just, from again, the outside looking in, then hearing you talk and like as how much effort you put into your bow setups and your arrow builds and all the things you're doing, it's like you're building these things up to make sure that they go right or have the least chance of going wrong, essentially, because you're
Yeah,
preparing for that.
I love how you put that. Yeah, it's all yeah, lots of effort. Nothing, it doesn't come naturally. And I love how you said I'm stacking the deck in my favor on my hunts with all of my preparation. So I'm huge on preparation, bow preparation, making the right phone calls before your hunt, making sure that well, you'll get a kick out of this. A little bit of a side tangent. I got to a hunt one time in Idaho, and there had been a burn. The fire had been burned out, and out of this one main trailhead, you could go like three different directions. Right? You wouldn't believe the number of people, hunters, who logged into the trail book saying that they were going to the exact drainage that 2 weeks ago had just burned the whole thing down. And I was just like, oh my word. That is like, I couldn't. And then the funny thing is like, we checked the logbook kind of just joking with ourselves. Like half those people had come out and like had put a note in the logbook, like didn't know there was a fire or something. And I was just like, could you imagine spending the
Oh,
first 3 days of your hunt just going like hiking 5-6 miles into this drainage, and then you're like, oh, it's burnt, and then you're like, oh snap, I guess we'll leave and go somewhere else.
yeah.
So like, yeah, making the right calls. One time I got bit in the butt. We were driving to Colorado and we had to go through this like kind of rural area, and dumb me didn't check. And Google isn't the best at, really rural areas and road conditions. Well, guess what? There was a road closure and we missed it by an hour. So we had to sleep. And that was just last year.
Really?
So yeah, so there's just always stuff that you have to that bit me. So we literally slept at the road closure until they opened it up at 6 a.m. So it's just constantly learning. It's just a constant battle of recapping what went well and what went wrong, after the season, what went well, what went wrong, figuring it out, making mental notes. And what I'm trying to do in Western Hunter is I'm trying to like prepare people for the shit that I've gone through so that they don't have to do it. And a lot of it's on the preparation end. The bow stuff, I'm a huge believer in like what you said, making your bow the most efficient for your exact hunt. Not I love the guy and he has great advice. Not what necessarily what Aaron Snyder says or not what so and so says. Like I preach two completely different arrow philosophies depending on what you're hunting, right? Like if you're hunting open country mule deer, that I'll put the blanket statement out here. This assumes that you have enough energy, right? That you've got a decent draw length, you're pulling 70 pounds, that energy isn't an issue. But my whole thought process is like preparing bow wise. Well, I want to optimize the best chance that I have of killing an animal. So there's like an arrow design and a bow design that can help me achieve that goal. And on open country hunts, in my opinion, based off of the shit that I've dealt with and mistakes that I've made, is ranging errors, right? Like most people, myself included, the errors that you make in open country hunts are ranging errors. Like you just get a misrange, even with a rangefinder. Sometimes you think you know it, you guess at the range, and it's wrong, or you use a rangefinder and range beyond it, or you hit some grass in front of it. Like you've been to Total Archery Challenge. How many times on some of those shots did you have to click your
Yeah.
rangefinder and actually get the right range, right? So range forgiveness is the most important thing in my mind on open country mule deer hunts, for example. So what that means is I want an arrow with a trajectory that's very flat, so it doesn't arc a lot as it's flying. What that means is at 80 yards, I'll just use 80 yards as an example. If you range something at 80 yards, well, let's say it's 82 yards. Well, with a slower arrow, with a slower, higher profile trajectory, you're if it's really 82 and you aim for 80, you're going to miss. You're going to be out of the kill zone. You may wound them, right? So I preach this thing called range forgiveness at 80 yards. So with every one of my setups, I want to know how far off on a range I can be at 80 yards and still hit the kill or be in the kill zone, right? For a mature mule deer, I figure is like 10 inches. So I've got plus or minus 5 inches. And on my fast arrow setup, the one that's optimized for open country hunting, I can be 3 yards off at 80 and still be in the kill zone. That's monumental, right? That's
Yeah.
if I would have known this 10, 15 years ago, I think back on the animals where I just shot just underneath it. Well, to go from shooting just underneath to clipping the heart, killing an animal is like 2 inches. So 3 inches, right? So if I would have known this stuff like 15 years ago, I would have killed some pretty damn good deer. In fact, one 180 class mule deer I have in mind right now. Then you contrast that with so guys in the Pacific Northwest hunting rosies, or guys in northern Idaho hunting Rocky Mountain elk, but really dense timber. Some places in Wyoming have really dense timber. Guys out east. I don't mean to like tromp on the eastern subject so much, but ambush hunting, water hunting. I take the exact opposite approach. Like unless you're hunting like a cornfield and you may expect like a 60, 70 yard shot across the cornfield, in that particular instance, I'd probably want a light, fast arrow so I could be off on the range. But like any other close quarter situations, I like an ultra heavy arrow because what I've learned based off of my experience sitting water and ambush hunting, which I've done a fair amount of, I do not want to wait for an ideal broadside shot because the wind can swirl. You want to minimize your time in the red zone. So for me, short range situations, thick cover, calling an elk, sitting water, sitting tree stands, all of that stuff, I want shot angle forgiveness. And how you get shot angle forgiveness is momentum. Momentum is probably the single most important factor for penetration, especially on heavy bone impact. So I like a really heavy arrow in short range situations so that I can, if I need to take a slightly quartering two shot and I catch the edge of the scapula, it's going to penetrate, right?
Yep.
So that those sort of things, like I get down to that sort of detail in my preparation because I truly feel that stacking the deck in your favor and more or less over preparing for hunts is the reason why I've been fairly successful.
No, I mean, I think that makes a whole lot of sense, and it's a very practical approach to it because, like you look at someone like me that has a shorter draw length, 27.5 inch draw, I shoot an ultra heavy arrow and I start shooting long ranges. You're off by a couple yards. You're completely
You're
missing.
done.
You're completely done, and this, or even just like when we were in Big Sky shooting Total Archery Challenge, we were in the timber, but shooting long distances like TAC is
Mm-hmm.
all about, it seems like. I remember I was shooting next to John Dudley and I was like, I don't think I'm gonna hit that branch. It's over top of it. And he's like, oh, you're good. In his mind, in which I found out later, he knew I was gonna hit it with my arrow setup. And I smashed that branch because it was so much arc at that distance
Yeah.
with the arrow that I was shooting, being a little bit, and it's not like ultra heavy or anything, but with my short draw length, it adds a little bit to it. So it just makes a whole lot of sense. And like for me, I am absolutely terrible at judging range without a rangefinder in open country. I've
Yeah.
learned that. I
I'm the
know
same.
I'm just terrible with it. I'm used to hunting whitetails in thick woods. I'm setting up in a tree for 15 to 25 yard
Yeah.
shots most of the time. It's completely different game than when you go out west
Yeah.
or if you're hunting ag country for whitetails and stuff like that. So
Yeah, exactly. And I killed like a 150 class 4 point number of years ago, sitting water, and it was the same. He came in right at last light. And, I remember it was the first time I'd shot a really, really heavy arrow, and he was quarter two. And the type of shot that if I'd shot, an Ulmer Edge at the time or a Rage, the shot hit the shoulder because he was quarter two, and it wouldn't have penetrated. But I was shooting, I believe it was a shuttle T at the time on a heavier arrow. And this is the first time where I was really like, it just makes sense to shoot a really heavy arrow in water sit in water because he's going to come to the water. That's 20 yards away. It's a very static situation. And I'd had multiple deer and spike elk wind me in the way they come in. And I was like, I just got to get that shot off as fast as I can. So basically, not whatever shot angle he gives me, but the first decent shot angle, take it, and bam, hammered that buck. I waited 20 minutes. He was piled up dead, but by then it was dark. I didn't want to bump him. So I backed out and went in the next morning and just freaking pinwheeled him. And he literally went like 40 yards. And yeah, so that's the thing. Like, and if I hadn't have had some sour experiences with, waiting for an ideal shot situation, I wouldn't have had this thought process of, okay, what can I do to have better opportunities on this situations? And then, if I could probably count on, I don't know if I could count on both hands the number of times I've misranged in my bow hunting career. And
yeah.
anyway, so that's the sort of thing. But then it even goes beyond that. Like for you and your situation, I was literally having a conversation today with a local guy uh, about he couldn't believe the speed that I was getting out of. I just posted some stuff on Instagram about a heavier arrow that I'm going to hunt elk with this year, and he couldn't believe the speed I was getting out of it. And I told him my specs. And he's like, "How is that possible? I have a longer draw length than you, and we're shooting essentially the same bow." Well, not everything is created equal because there are different bows and cams and whatnot, draw length and brace heights that can factor into all that stuff. And I'm with you. I have a 28-inch draw, so I'm a little bit longer, but
Yeah.
I also pull 80 pounds. But there's bows that are optimized for different ranges or different draw lengths, like this Hoyt RX-7 that I shoot. The smaller axle to axle one, the 30-inch in the 28-inch cam is the top. The 28-inch cam is or 28-inch draw length is the fastest or the top spot on that module. So it's incredibly efficient. I'm shooting so for this elk hunt, a couple elk hunts I'm doing this year, kind of open country, so I don't want to go like ultra heavy. It's pretty open, but I want to use a fixed blade. Not that I don't have confidence in like a sever. I always want to have a fixed blade for elk hunting. Not that I wouldn't shoot a mechanical. I carry both in my quiver, but I don't like shooting fixed blades over like 285 feet per second. So um, I've got this arrow that it's going 281 feet per second, and it's like 545 grains or something like that, and it's going 281. And this particular guy, he's shooting um, an RX-7 Ultra at 505, and it was going in like the 270s, and he couldn't believe it. And I was just like, well, that's the difference between the RX-7 and the RX-7 Ultra, me being in a very efficient spot on my cam and you being in not so efficient spot in your cam. So you can't just go to the bow shop and be like, oh, James Yates likes this bow, that's the one I want to get. Now you gotta kind of do some research on your own. Like, oh, my draw length's a little different. Like Hoyt's got different bows that are optimized for different draw lengths.
That makes sense.
Does that make sense? So Hoyt's pretty clever in what they do. Like, I know you shoot a prime, right?
Yep.
So prime's gone back and forth. I used to shoot a lot of primes, and prime for the most part has been draw length specific cams, right? So you have to get a cam specific for your draw length. Well, there for a couple of years, they went to a rotating mod that covered all the draw lengths. Well, then you're going to lose efficiency on those lower draw lengths, a lot of efficiency. And I think they had customers that were complaining about that. So Prime went back to a draw length specific cam.
Yep.
Well, Hoyt's kind of in a position where they want to offer some flexibility, some resale. It kind of sucks with, I actually prefer from Prime the draw length specific cams. I didn't like their move to the rotating mod, because for us shorter guys, we were just getting chopped and our heads chopped off with the efficiency loss. And the draw length specific cam was helping with that. But then resale sucks. If your draw length was off a little bit, you have to get a new cam to fix that. Well, Hoyt's got basically every bow has two mods, a smaller mod and a bigger mod. But all of their bows, literally all of their bows in their lineup, the 4 hunting bows, if you will, the VTM 31, VTM 34, the RX-7 and the RX-7 Ultra, they're all optimized for different draw lengths. So you can find a bow in the Hoyt lineup that is within basically one adjustment of being optimized for your draw length, but you still get the flexibility of having a range of draw lengths. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm following you.
So there's some resale. If you were screwed up, if you're at the top of the cam and you need a slightly longer draw length, well, that's not going to help you. But so you get the best of both worlds, right? You get a bow that's optimized for your draw length, plus you have some variability on the draw length. So it's kind of unique in the industry. Anyway, so that's the sort of thing that I'm talking. You can't just like go buy an RX-7 because James Yates shoots that at 318 feet per second or whatever. It's very specific to my draw length, that sort of deal. So this is all preparation. It's all really important to success.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's also so important, like when you go into an archery shop to shoot and then shoot all the bows and see what feels comfortable and what makes sense for you. Like for a lot of years I had shot a Matthews bow, and honestly, I liked those bows and they were great bows, but I always felt like it was top heavy to me. It always felt top heavy. So then that's when I grabbed a prime and I was like, man, that center grip for me, just like I felt steadier on target and I was able to, keep the balance well. So it's like, there's all these different things that come into it, but there's other people that are like, oh, maybe that's not for me. And that's okay. That's why there's different manufacturers and different models and everything. And honestly, I had never looked at like what you were talking about with where it's the most efficient depending on the cam and everything for that.
Yeah, and I've got an article that kind of describes that in Western Hunter, specifically with the Hoyt, and talks about that in a little bit more detail, but it's just kind of an overall general conversation. So a lot of my articles that I write in Western Hunter are kind of to the tune of this discussion, like how to be ultra prepared, mostly from an archery perspective, but one or two articles a year I kind of go a little bit broader in general preparation terms as well. Um,
Yep.
so I'm a big nut on preparation for success. And
Yeah. No,
uh,
that that makes a lot of sense.
the just to highlight that prime center grip thing, that is really nice. I do miss that a little bit, the extra mass of the bow below the grip, and it just really helps it. I mean, I use the analogy of using holding on a sledgehammer with the weight down versus the weight up. Gravity wants to take that one way or the other, but when it's down, gravity wants to take it down. Obviously, that's an extreme example, but that's the whole reason why you want to mount your stabilizers low and get your stabilizer weight as low as you can. And that's the whole reason why Prime does their center grip. So, there's physics behind all of this stuff. And fortunately, being an engineer, I'm educated in that sort of stuff. So I understand that maybe a little bit more than the average person. I just try to apply it to my articles and my mindset.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And like, again, and I think what you're talking about, from an archery perspective and also from a hunt planning perspective is just so relevant, especially to us from the East that are going out West. Say you have, 10 days vacation, 7 days vacation, 14 days, whatever it is. Like you can't be screwing around and messing up. And, the road closure thing made me laugh because a couple years ago when I was in Colorado, we got out there 3 days early before season, and I was going to the spot and I saw where there was a fire, but I was getting mixed when I called the office there about whether it was going to be closed at that time or not. So we kind of just had to try it. And I really wanted to glass from this spot and get there. And yep, well, the road was closed, but if I wouldn't have been there even, before season or anything, that would have been, I was almost a half a day drive just to get to this spot in the canyon. Luckily I had, multiple accesses kind of listed out, but that was the easiest one to be able to get to. And it can screw with you pretty
Dude,
good.
yeah, when you're working on a limited time and all of a sudden you've lost a half a day, 2 days, you're just like, well, shit. I kind of look at hunts at the number of days times two. That's really how many opportunities you have, right? One in the evening, one in the morning. And it's just all of a sudden you start, and then all of a sudden the number of opportunities, if you will, are down onto two hands. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, they're down onto one hand, and you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just every day counts, especially I am the most unlucky person when it comes to tags in the world. Like I have literally in 10 years never drawn a tag that I wasn't guaranteed. So like I drew a 3-point unit in Colorado for a rifle deer hunt and I spent 7 points on it. I didn't think it was actually one of those where dumb Colorado, like dumb Utah, you actually put in for the tags before they give you the tag allocation. And this particular unit, they cut the tags back from winter kill, and then I put in with 7 points in a 6-point unit is what I thought. I was like, yeah, that's fine. My buddy had 8, so he took it up the butt a little worse than me. But we put in, and then we find out, guess what? They doubled the number of tags, so it went from a 6-point draw to a 3-point draw. Anyway, we ended up killing a 185-inch typical for my buddy, and then I killed like a 178 typical young deer, but kind of one of those classic young deer with bomber genetics. He has like a 4 or 5 inch kicker, good frame, 26, 27 inches wide, and good eye guards. But the type of deer that would have been 200 inches the next year probably. But
Yeah.
I got greedy towards the end of the hunt, and I just wanted to kill him. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're spot on with it. I like how you looked at it from the number of opportunities, like when you're looking at, morning, night, as far as that's when you're most likely to have, the opportunities there. And it's just like I've not, been probably doing it even close to as long as you have, but like, I started hunting out west in 2016 and going through that, and the amount of mistakes and stuff that I found, like probably the most prepared I was when it was the last time that I'd elk hunted before last year's 2019. And at that point I'd went 3 years without killing an elk, and it was just like,
Mm-hmm.
man, I was just struggling. I just basically put everything down on paper that where my problems were. And when I got this Idaho tag, it was an over-the-counter tag, which it still is, but it was easier to get at that time. And I was like, okay, I need to just go through and have backup plan after backup plan and have different hunt areas at different elevations and all these different things. And I put so much time into e-scouting and planning and looking all this stuff. And I ended up killing my first bull on day one of the hunt.
Nice.
And it was like, but it was one of those things where, you look at it, it's like, okay, I was planning on being there for 14 days and I stayed and helped buddies out, but it was like, yeah, it looked like it was the first day, but that was actually day 40 if you look at it from all the other, years of experiences and trying to get to that point. But what I learned from that, and that's what I took going forward, was just like, the more I put into that planning up front, the better chances I'm going to have when I get there. Or if you run into a roadblock of some sorts, more hunting pressure than you expected, or no elk or deer, whatever it is, you're not scrambling to find the next spot. You have it already on paper. You're ready for it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And you didn't quite say this, but you probably agree, is how I coined this phrase in this last article that I wrote that I think's coming out in let's see what day that'll be, just before September, so the end of August. How a hunt starts is how it's going to persist. If you come into a hunt and you're really well prepared, your hunts just seem to go smooth. If you come into a hunt, hunts are really demanding on us mentally and physically, right? So if you come into a hunt and you're shot, you just, I don't know, maybe you had an argument with your boss or your wife, or maybe you're mentally burned out because of issues like that, or maybe you're hunting a dry drainage and you're trying to get a few days worth of water up the day before the opener, just so you don't have to cycle to get water, and you get up and day one you're exhausted because you just hiked an 80-pound pack with 2 extra gallons of water up 3,000 feet of vert. And I have just found that how a hunt starts is how it's going to persist. So if you start tired, you're going to be tired throughout the rest of the hunt. If you're mentally effed up because you had a fight with your wife or your boss before you left, you're going to be mentally effed up for the rest of the hunt. If you're scrambling with your options, you're going to be scrambling for the rest of the hunt. So again, not to drill the preparation, but man, it's just so important. Just so important to start that hunt off on the right foot. Not saying that you can't recover from a bad start. It's just hard.
Yeah, no. And again, I just think of so many just reminders of that. Last year too, I was hunting in Alberta, and I was like, wanted to get to West Virginia to hunt the rut. And I was like, my water line broke at my house and I was trying to clean that up and go. I ended up having to drive all the way through the night and I didn't sleep. And what do you know? My immune system runs myself down and I'm sick. And the hunt started off being sick, and it was just like I was putting in 40% of the effort that I normally would have been able to do. And, I came home with the tag in my pocket, and it was just like, and I felt super confident before that. It's like, if I would have just gave myself a day of rest, between there and went down. And even if I had one less day to hunt, I would have been more efficient for that time versus trying to push it.
Yeah, limp along. Yeah, I remember just recognizing your body. I remember on a hunt I was doing with some buddies, I had just burned my butt at work, and I remember getting midday to our camp, and this was an elk hunt. We could already hunt. It wasn't an opener deal. And I remember two of the guys went off one way, but I literally I'd been up for, I don't know, a stupid amount of time, 36 hours or something. And I told my partner, I was like, hey, I'm first up. this isn't going to affect you because I'm first up. I'm going to take a 2 hour nap. And I literally started out the hunt taking a 2 hour nap, but I just needed it. I remember like how overwhelming it felt to go out and immediately start hunting that day. And I ended up taking a 2 hour nap, and that really helped. Obviously, that's really small, but
Yeah. But
it speaks volumes to listen to your body and listen. And that's become more important the older I'm almost 40, so I'm starting to get in that geezer age. So I'm having to start thinking about those things. Like I've been having hip problems. Who has hip problems, right? No, like
yeah, yeah, you're spot on. I mean, we've talked about it on the podcast before on the whitetail side of things. It's like, okay, during the rut, you're spending a lot of time in a tree sitting dark to dark and just, the ambush style hunting. Well, you try to take advantage of that time you have off, but it's like you do that day after day. And even though you're just sitting there, it's exhausting mentally. And, so like for me, if I say I do 3 or 4 days and I'm just like absolutely wore out, I might sleep in a little bit. And then and for me, I found that like the most where I've killed the most deer is during the middle of the day during the rut. So it's like, okay, I'll skip that first couple hours in the morning, get some rest, reset, get a good breakfast in, and then go in and do it. And it's just like, and maybe some people don't need that, but for me, I've learned that for me to be, and be efficient and active while I'm in the woods and focused on the task at hand, that's what I need to do.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Listening to your body. Yep.
Yeah,
no,
most definitely. What else do you think on the preparation side that you see either yourself or others kind of make mistakes on specifically on like Western hunts?
Making sure even your mechanical broadheads fly with your field tips. A lot of people think that mechanicals just inherently fly, and for the most part they do, especially Severs. I really like the Sever, so that's a shameless plug for Sever. For the most part they fly, but always just they've got that practice mode. Make sure that if somebody were to tell me that they can shoot a Sever with their field tip out to 120 yards, I call bullshit, because there's some drag to the Sever, and they're going to start dropping probably at 80, 90, 100 yards a little bit. Maybe it doesn't get meaningful to 90, 100, but anyway, you still want to, and it's not just drag. You want to make sure that your tune's decent. Couple of, like I said, make some phone calls, check Onyx maps, make sure that there's no fires in the immediate area, or that you're not going to be impacted by smoke potentially. The road closures is another big one. This is all stuff that has personally bit me. Making sure that everything's screwed down on your bow. I know that's sounds trivial, but it cost me a 330 type bull on the Wasatch Front General Archery. So that's an OTC tag. So that's a giant bull for the unit. My rest had, I hunt some off a bike, and the bouncing, side by side could do the same, can kind of jar some things loose. So just constantly making sure that all the screws are tight on your bow. The rest, the sight, that sort of thing. I like to keep my string clean. If you're out in dusty areas out west, I kind of got this unique method for cleaning my bowstring. I use a little bit of wax, and I get it on the string. And then I take a piece of serving and I wrap it around the bowstring material, and I run that serving up. And so I'm peeling that wax off, but with that wax comes all the dirt. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So that's peeling the dirt out. So once you've done that a time or two and you get the bulk of that wax off, then I'll take a very light layer of wax, and just make sure that it's smooth. You definitely, so over waxing can perpetuate a dirty problem, right? If it's tacky to the touch, then you're going to be attracting dirt. So the thing with wax is to use it sparingly. And what does sparingly mean? It shouldn't be tacky to the touch. You shouldn't feel any sort of that waxy, sticky stuff on the string. It it feels more dry than it feels waxy. It's hard to explain, but
Okay.
I've even heard of guys that will use other stuff besides wax because they're afraid that it'll attract dirt. I personally have had no problem with just using, once you peel off, I use a decent amount of wax to get that dirt off of it, right? Once you peel that off with the serving material, then at that point it's very light layer of wax. So they're definitely not heavy waxing. So that's important to keep your string in good shape, especially if you're trying to get a couple years use out of your string, which honestly you should be able to with a good string builder and maintaining your strings. I shoot more than any person I physically know at 80 pounds, and I can get 2 years out of my string builder strings.
Really?
There are a couple of times he's a local guy. His name's Ken, Dark Archer. He does fantastic work. He's in Lehi, Utah. He does ship out, by the way. But the beginning of this year, I went down and I had him reserve one section. And we actually decided that I probably didn't even need to do that because there was a tiny bit of serving separation on the outside of the arc, but on the inside on the inside of the string where it's actually touching the cam, there was no separation there. It was just on the outside of the bundle. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's not really causing any impact at all.
No. And it was just so minor, but regardless, I just had him do it. And then I also generally replace my center serve every year if I'm trying to get a second year on my strings. But if you maintain your strings, hunting out west is really dirty if you're cognizant of that. I'm not saying that you need to do that like multiple times during your hunt, but if you hunt 4 months like I do, it's very important to do it throughout. Obviously there's
I was just gonna make a point on the bow thing. So one thing I learned was it seemed like Hamsky has fixed the problem a little bit, but on their rest, they used bolts before that would just rust like crazy. And not that it was like extremely a functional problem while you're there, but just drove me nuts. Where, when I'd spend, 2-3 weeks out there, it was like by the time I was done, my bow just had rust all over the bolts and they were just completely, covered in it. And, I'd reached out to them about it, and then they're like, oh yeah, we knew it was a problem. And they sent me replacement bolts, and, the one I have, since then that I've had has been fine, but it was just, do you do anything as far as like with your bolts and stuff to prevent rust?
No, not really.
Okay.
I've not, no, I haven't. It's annoying. I agree with you. It hasn't been a huge problem. The most precipitation that I seem to hunt with is in snow in our late extended archery hunt. For whatever reason, the rains that kind of come in your typical bow hunting months of August and September, they just seem to either be downpours or not, right? And you're not going to hunt during a downpour. So I'm either tucked up underneath a pine tree or, that's not to say I've never hunted in a sprinkle. I do every year, but yeah, I haven't. Light layer of wax, little bit of oil, a little bit of WD, anything like that would help prevent that. Obviously, if you're going to use something like that, you'd want to put the WD on early enough that kind of the smell, the stuff that's volatile, that's producing a smell, is vaporized off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, good question. But personally, no, I haven't. That's not been something too high on my radar.
No. Okay. No, that's a fair answer there.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.